Here we go. All right. Welcome, everyone. Very excited to have you here today. I'm here with Elizabeth C. Hamblet. And to give you a little background on Elizabeth, we're going to be talking about how to help students with ADHD succeed in college. If you don't know Elizabeth, which I think many of you probably already do, Elizabeth has worked as a learning disability specialist in college disability services for 2 decades. Previously, she's a nationally requested speaker on preparing students with disabilities for successful college transitions. She's also the author of the Amazon bestseller, which recently came out, 7 Steps to College Success, a pathway for students with disabilities. And you can find her on her website at ldadvisory.com. Thank you. I appreciate that. Where she's sharing a weekly newsletter for participants. She has a private face group just for parents and some well behaved coaches and other providers. And I know you've got articles on Attitude and Chat and all types of places. So we're really privileged to have you today. Thanks for coming, Elizabeth.
Thank you for having me. I do love talking about executive functioning.
Well, you're in the right place because that is all we talk about around here pretty much. So why don't we jump into it? First off, congratulations on your book. I'd love to kind of start with some of the main themes from the book. So first, what do students with ADHD typically struggle with in college, in your experience?
Sure. I mean, it's so interesting because I just had this conversation with somebody last week too in a different interview. So much of what we're worried about when we worry about how students with disabilities will transition is common across students with learning disabilities, ADHD, and the neurotypical population. And honestly, more parents of neurotypical students, I think, should be worried because it's kind of the same challenge. In high school, life is so structured, right? Everybody tells you what time you've got to get up. You've got to be in the same building, most of us, all day long. You just shuffle from class to class and it's over. And then you might have activities structuring your afternoon, and that sort of then hems in the time that you're going to work on things. Perhaps if the dinner, as a family is slotted in there, but kind of when you need to do that. And all of that structure is gone at college. And so, students have massive amounts of time to manage well, which is really hard. What's also been taken away is the impetus of and the demands of like nightly assignments. So you get this syllabus at the beginning of the semester, and it often will list every single week of the semester and what readings you have to do. A lot of professors don't provide comprehension questions. You just are expected to read the chapter or sometimes the whole book in time for class next week, be able to answer questions. But without those checks, I think, the deliverables, if you will, assignments you have to turn in, I think make it easier to actually get the work done. But when it's just down to you and your own motivation, for being prepared for class, it can be harder to get work done. And so it's a lot of independence. It's a lot of self driving and self monitoring for students. And I think those are challenges for everybody, but especially so if you have weaknesses in areas that make that challenging.
When parents come to you after that initial shock, or they hear about you, I'm sure,
Yeah.
once their kid has tried to enter college, hopefully before, but often this type of work is post the kind of breakdown. What are they struggling with? What are their issues that they're feeling like, I don't know how to deal with this, I need help?
Right. So in my university position, and I'm not allowed to talk about where I work, but I do work one on one with students. So I'm actually talking directly to students, and so often they've come in. It depends on when they come in, and what's such an interesting thing too is that often I have a lot of one-off appointments with students who are actually really strategic and doing really good things. But part of the reason they're so successful is they access all the help that's available to them. So I sit down with them virtually. We talk about what they're doing, and I find out actually they're in really good shape. When that's not the case, it's often that, a few weeks have gone by in the semester. They haven't done any readings. Perhaps a paper is already late. Um, and they're just overwhelmed, because what happens too, as you can imagine, is they know the stuff still has to get done. They may be able to shave some stuff off as far as doing reading, all of the readings. I mean, if I had $1, been working in colleges for a very long time, if I had $1 for every time a student said nobody could do all of this reading, I'd never need to go to work again. So they can maybe get by without doing everything. But as things pile up, then it's overwhelming. A, their anxiety goes up. B, their ability to prioritize gets harder because there's the back work that's due, and then there's the stuff that's in front of them. So I'll usually try to triage by saying, okay, like, what's due tomorrow, what's due the next day, like, let's make a plan. And I get very specific with them, like, what does the rest of your day look like? Can you manage this assignment today? So that's off the list and off the list. We try to sort things. Some of my very strategic students create a spreadsheet at the beginning of the term with all of their deadlines into it. And that's a great strategy. So, trying to share what I learned from other students about what they're using. But I think what's challenging too is a lot of students are accustomed to just getting, extensions and additional days to write papers, and that's not what commonly happens for them at the college level.
Yeah, what are the biggest kind of wake up calls that kids should be aware of, and their parents, when transitioning from high school? Maybe they had an IEP or a 504 plan. What should they be anticipating? I know you just mentioned not being able to have extensions on writing assignments. What are some other big wake ups that they need to be aware of?
Yeah, I think the deadline extension, I mean, when I give these presentations, I always make sure to include that, because I know that that is a huge shift. And the reason it's so important is there is time in high school for, even for students who are in the last half of their senior year, to start to learn how to make interim deadlines and set aside the time to do that. And it's going to be such useful practice for them. There are these great things called assignment calculators. I don't know if you've seen any of these, Sean.
No, I'm curious about
Oh my
that.
gosh, let me see. Can I interrupt us to
Yes,
pull up
please
a
do.
great
Yeah.
link? Sure. Um, so strangely, I have found a colleague introduced me to this one in particular. There are lots of different iterations of this. And if people just, let me see, where can I drop this?
Yeah, is there, you can drop it in the chat box, or there might be, I don't know if there's an option for you to present, but I'd love for you to pull it up if that is an option.
Oh, here we go. Well, it seems to only be going into the private chat, so give that a try.
Hey, let's see. Oh, I got it. Yeah, let me pull it up here. I'm gonna pop it onto the screen and
Oh,
you can
fantastic.
walk me through it so everyone can see it too.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. I'm going to share screen and go to Window Assignment Planner. There we go.
Oh, perfect. Here we go. So this is such a cool tool. And if students don't like this one, they can do a search, and it's usually university libraries. So I would try, keywords, university library assignment calculator. So Sean, go ahead, plug in today's date.
Okay, so date, you'll begin the assignment with, oh, they got the today button. That's so useful. I love it. Date assignment is due. Okay, so let's say it's due. Should I put next week, or what do you
I can
think?
give it 2 weeks. Let's give you some time.
A couple weeks, so maybe the
Yeah,
31st.
sure.
Okay.
Often they're going to have at least a week, and probably more like 2. And
Okay.
then what kind of paper do you have to do?
Well, this is a good question. I've got to do a research essay. My
Oh,
favorite.
funny you should ask. There it is.
Oh,
Oh,
what happened here? Hold on, let me try to refresh it.
oh, is it not the right link? Let's see. Let me try it over here offline.
Oh no, it did it. It did
Oh,
it.
it's going.
Okay, here
Okay.
we go. Step
Yeah.
percentage. Wow,
So
this is
what's
impressive.
this percentage just shows you how much of the whole time and effort you'll put into the whole project each step will take.
Oh my
Um,
God.
So I think sometimes this is more detailed than students really need. Like, understand your assignment. Might be a little deep, and it probably doesn't take a full day. But I think just getting those deadlines, and you can add these right into their Google Calendar. Even better though can be, or in addition to, I shouldn't say better than that, is having the printout
Yeah.
and striking off, the steps as they go. It's really hard. I am, first of all, old, and secondly, still a believer in paper things. And e-calendars are great, i-calendars are great, but there is things go away too easily, if you will. And so, when I used to work in the university's office, I've been remote since the pandemic started. I used to have up on the wall a calendar, month at a glance for the whole term, and would cross off days as we go, because I think marking the track of time for students, for whom sensing that is really hard. And I'd have just those individual highlighted dates, so that it wasn't cluttered with everything that was happening at the university. It was just like midterms and finals, the last day to drop an ad. And I do think that when students have projects coming up, printing a calendar, putting it up on the wall, and isolating those due dates can be really useful. Because again, as you cross off the days as they're coming up, you feel the march of time in the way that perhaps students don't experience it in their everyday.
Right. Well, yeah, that totally 100%. And I always tell clients and families, like, kids with ADHD, because of their working memory, they
Yeah.
can't hold as much information there. So they need to put it out around them, externalize
Mhm.
it. But this is a fantastic resource, Elizabeth. We've got
Yeah,
a
so
comment from Academic Pathfinder says, "What an awesome resource. I've never heard of this, but I can see that this will be so valuable for college students." I mean, to me, this is beautiful. I'm like, whoever thought of this or however this was created, it's just a lovely tool. And I love that it has resources on it too, where it's like, okay, here, you can kind of test and evaluate the resources. It has, the fact that it also has it for every type of assignment. That's really exciting to see. Just, it's almost like a second brain, right? It's like someone thinking through it for you, so you can kind of just follow the steps, and then eventually you'll be able to kind of do those things on your own, hopefully. But if not, this is available to you, so that's a great tool.
And I think it's really important too for teachers or parents to talk through the steps with students, because what's not in here, for instance, is if you want somebody to check your draft, you have to plan ahead of that. You've got to give them a few days, which means some of these deadlines have to back up even further into your process. And so, the more we are explicit with students, and walking them through the steps, so that eventually they hopefully can start to anticipate what they're going to need, I think is really important. Anything that we just hand to them, I think is probably not the best way to do things. But to talk through it with them and ask them, do you think all of these steps are necessary? Do you want more time to do this? And then they're going to have to look at what their weeks are coming up. What are the events? Are they going to have to, you know, forego something that they wanted to do in order to get a paper on time? Because, a colleague of mine who's a disability services director said, there are accommodations, but in the end, students with disabilities are probably going to need more time than their classmates. And the reason that a lot of colleges, and certainly I can't speak for everybody, and individual students might get this accommodation of a few more days, they don't often approve it, because students have often had at least 2 weeks to write a paper.
Right.
And a lot of the challenges that often they will wait till the night before.
Hmm.
And so if we extend that deadline, it's hard to imagine they will spend the 3 days between the initial due date and the extension writing the paper. It feels like they're going to just wait the 3 more days until the night before the new deadline.
Right.
Um, and
Yeah.
so we've effectively not changed the amount of time that they're going to use writing the paper.
Yeah. I think when kids, especially kids with ADHD, see an assignment, right? Research paper, it's one word, and they think that's one thing. But then when you
Oh,
see
that's
it
so
in this
interesting.
model,
Yeah.
right, and you see, okay, it's this step, it's this step, it's like this is 10 to 15 things. And even though it's one might say, oh, that's overwhelming, another person might look at it and say, this is more clear. Like I
Mhm.
know what I actually have to do, as opposed to the kind of like false idea that research paper is one thing. No, this is going to take.
That's such an interesting point. Yeah.
So I think this is very helpful. I'll definitely be using this with parents. I do want to let people know too, if you have questions or feedback, drop it in the chat box so we can ask Elizabeth why we have her here. I want to ask you, Elizabeth, not necessarily what are the right colleges, but how can a student with ADHD find the right college for them? Like, what process should they go through in order to find a place where they're going to be able to get the supports and help they need?
That's a great question. And, I think it would be comforting to folks. I think they would like to know that there's a best college for students with ADHD or a best college for students with dyslexia. But the truth is that it's so much more nuanced than that, right? Because everybody has, even with the same, identified disability like ADHD, their profiles are different. And there really isn't a college that's best, for instance, for students with, weak working memory or weak prioritization. So they really should start the search with the same, agenda that their neurotypical classmates have of where do I, in geographically speaking, where do I want to go and what do I want to study, big or small, liberal arts or art school or engineering school. One of the things I say in my presentations all the time is students should look at the graduation requirements for every college that they're going to apply to. And this applies to their neurotypical peers too, because if a college, liberal arts college requires 2 of this subject and 2 of that subject and 2 of that subject, that might not be of interest to them. And we know for students with ADHD, interest is really helpful when getting them through things, that are long and hard. And so they might, if they have an inclination toward, again, and I'm just using engineering and art because those are the things that are familiar to me, those schools sometimes don't have that range of core or general requirements. And that can be, appealing to some students. For some students, there are schools that run on quarters. So they take fewer classes than they might at a school on semesters. So there's less to concentrate on at a time. But sometimes the pace is a lot for students. So that's something to think about too. And, making sure that wherever they go actually has, if they don't know what their major, what they want to study, perhaps a lot of different kinds of majors, a bigger school that offers more so that they can poke around and, try some stuff out. So as far as the supports go, all colleges have to provide at least some minimal accommodations. So that's really important to know. The only exceptions to having to provide any accommodations are to schools that refuse all federal funds, which 99% I think probably do. I've never seen an official number, but GI Bill money, Pell Grants, federal student loans, research money. If a school takes that, and even schools with gigantic endowments do that, they have to follow the rules. So if they don't do that, and it's a private and religious school, those are the only schools that are exempt. So your students should expect that any college that they're going to apply to will have a bunch of basic accommodations at the very least available to, and I want to be very specific here, students who are found eligible for them. There is a review process that they will go through. They will probably fill out a form either online or print a PDF, register with the office. There's no child find at the college level. We're not under IDEA. We're under Section 504, but a different subpart than the K through 12 schools were under Subpart E, and the ADA, I should say. And so they will have to locate our office's website, find the process to register, complete the registration, submit documentation, and then the college will decide what accommodations they're eligible for.
So that's really important information. And for some of our parents who might be a little less experienced in all these processes, so Child Find is a school district's requirement or legal obligation to find children with suspected disabilities and assess and provide them services, right? So that's really important to know about. A lot of parents aren't aware of that, and it's their right, that their child should receive services if they have a disability. But thank you for sharing that, that's not applicable to college, right? So it's basically, what I'm hearing is that it's all on the student and the family to approach the school and approach the disability resource department or the student accessibility services. When should they be doing that, Elizabeth? When should they be? Is that something they do the senior year of high school? Should they be doing it right when they start off in their freshman year?
So they can certainly ask questions, and I am sorry I got myself off on a tangent, but um, to uh, to return to this to the college search piece, they can do a lot of the research online, looking at the disability services sites at the colleges that they're looking at, and poke around to see, do they offer some things that they don't have to, but they just do for free. So for instance, University of Massachusetts Amherst, I happened to stumble upon while getting ready for a presentation, and they offer, I think it's 6 months of weekly meetings with a learning disability specialist for free.
Hmm.
So those are the kinds of things that you can see. Does the office offer workshops? So, another thing to keep in mind is that the mandates are very, very different, in K through 12 versus college. And so colleges don't have to provide executive function coaches. They don't have to provide ADHD coaching. If they do that, they can charge for that. And so there are some very well-known programs that do that. But families should go, expect that students will have to seek it out on their own privately at a lot of schools, unless they've made sure that the college that they're going to offers that service for free. So they can ask these questions, on my YouTube channel. I did a video of how I tracked through a college's disability services site and poked around to see what they offered. It's also really important to look at the other supports on campus. So is there a tutoring center? Don't assume that there is. And do they cover all classes or only certain ones? Is there a counseling center? Is there a health center that can refill your students' meds if they take meds? These are all really important things to at least know about. Now with Zoom and everything else since the pandemic, I think there's a lot more access to support folks. To that, so that your student doesn't necessarily have to go to a place that offers it on campus. But if they're interested in that, they need to make sure it's available.
So I know we started talking because I was asking you some questions about how to find a counselor for one of my clients who they'd gone to a certain college, but it was, fine college, but it didn't really provide the comprehensive supports they needed as a student with ADHD and other disabilities. So you had a list of counselors that you shared with me. So check that out. On Elizabeth's webpage, LD Advisory, she has a whole list of neurodiverse friendly college counselors who can support students looking for colleges. The other thing I wanted to ask about is there's so many steps students need to take, and you've shared a bunch of key ones, right? You got to consider: do they have tutoring on campus? Do they have disability resources or all the different things that are going to be helpful, medical assistance? What is I'm sure you've got a great resource around that. Can your book is obviously going to be one of the key models to go through to find the right college and find the right situation for their child. Where else can they look to find kind of resources they need to prepare and successfully transition to college?
Okay, so I thought that question was going in a different direction. So one thing I want to mention is the K&W guide, which will be updated I think the new one comes out September 2023. So it's the only consistently updated comprehensive resource I'm aware of, for programs, for colleges that offer programs for a fee. So, for those who really do need a lot of adult support, they should know that, again, I mentioned colleges can't charge for our accommodations, but we can charge for the supports that we don't have to offer, which are offered through structured programs. University of Arizona is an example of that. So they have a list of the colleges that do that, and then a page of information about literally hundreds of colleges. So as far as how to get ready, there's a great book by Kathleen Nadeau, the name of which escapes me, of course, right now. I think the Smart but Scattered series of books is a great resource. You can listen to a podcast by my friends Rachel and Stephanie, the Learn Smarter podcast, which is all about executive functioning, lots of tips for families from two educational therapists. So, and go into your social networks and see, Seth Perler is somebody whose work I know a lot of people like. There are a lot of great resources out there if you look for them.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing those. And that's good to know about the KNW guide. I wasn't aware of that. So just knowing that you can check that out, you can identify, kind of, it sounds like almost like add-ons to the college experience that are going to be more comprehensive supports than just throwing your kid into the school and saying, go be successful. So I want to, kind of end with this question around, tell us, you mentioned kind of that they're not going to have the same rights, but they are covered under Section 504 and the ADA. What rights do students have in college that they can expect and advocate for so they can have a successful experience?
And thank you for bringing it back to that, because I do need to say this thing I try to remember to say in every single interview, but neglected to. To be very clear, we are under Section 504, but Subpart E, Subpart D. So while you're not going to find this wording in the law, what it means in effect is that students' 504 plans are not legally valid documents that colleges have to follow when your student gets there. So your student should not just expect to receive certain accommodations simply because they were in their 504 plan. We don't have the same obligations. We may consider that history, and we may accept the 504 as a form of documentation when your student registers, but their 504s are not binding on us. And the same is true for the IEPs. IDEA doesn't even apply at the college level. And so those plans too may be useful as documents that we look at to see your student's history. It might have useful information about them, but we don't have to provide accommodations simply because your student had them under the IEP either. So just to be clear. So their rights are, first of all, not to identify themselves to us at all. If they decide they don't want accommodations, they never have to talk to us. We can't force them to register with us, which is why it's really important for parents to talk to students about that. If they register with us, they don't have to use their accommodations. If, great, if you take your first set of exams and you find that you didn't need your accommodations and you decide to go without them, we will not go down to your dorm room and drag you out for your next exam and make you utilize those accommodations. So, it's only to their benefit to register with us. And unlike when they take the SAT, if they finish an exam, they don't usually have to sit there for the rest of the time. They're allowed to leave when they want, and they don't know that, which is why some of them perhaps don't register. If a professor says, well, you can't have that accommodation in my class, I don't believe in this stuff, there is a process that should happen where other folks review the professor's objections, but professors don't get to decide on their own that a student can't have something that our office has approved. So, and they have right to privacy around the information about their disability. We're going to have to tell their professors that they are an individual with a disability, because that's the way you get accommodations. But, I'm hoping none of our colleagues, at these 4,000 colleges actually typically say what the disability is when they notify professors, through an email or a notification. Generally, they'll just say, Elizabeth, it has been approved by us for these accommodations.
Yeah, that's so important to know about that. It's, because I think that could be really shocking for parents to say, hey, we fought for this 504, we have it, we have all these accommodations, like, go ahead, take it. And then they're like, nope, sorry, this doesn't apply. So it's really important for parents to know that, first off, and then also to know that they have a partner and a friend, in the resources department, because I know from my experience, there have been those professors who are really not accommodating and really challenging.
Yeah.
And it can be the kind of end. If, I had a student who was ready to drop out because the professor was so, rigid and difficult, and she felt like she couldn't make it through. But when she went to the disability resource department, they worked out a plan. The lead at the resource, or counselor there, talked to the professor, and they came up with a winning solution. So,
Oh, good.
yeah, so it's really important to
Okay.
know that there is an advocate and a support in people like yourself, at colleges all over the country. So last thing, tell us a little bit more about how we can follow more of your work and check out what you're doing and sharing. I'm also going to put on the screen a link to your book so people
Thank
can
you.
check that out. So if you want to go to that link, copy that. I don't know if you can copy it on the screen. You can check that out. But tell us a little bit more about how we can find out more about what you're working on.
Sure. Thank you. So I offer lots of free information on my website. It's ldadvisory.com. But if you just look for my name, and hopefully the SEO is good enough, it'll pop up. And from there, you can follow the link to my YouTube channel. I do talks just like this one that Sean has done, and post those up on YouTube. All sorts of stuff related to college applications for students with learning disabilities and ADHD, the process of preparation, all sorts of stuff is there. Hopefully you'll buy my book because it's the most extensive, detailed explanation I can offer you for all the stuff you need to know. I have on-demand webinars up. You can link to those from my site as well. Check out the blog. That's bonus interview content that didn't make it in the book that I think also just sort of brings all of this stuff, to life with anecdotes. So lots of different ways to find me. Oh yeah, and social media, I'm everywhere.
You are. And are you still publishing a column in Attitude or any of?
I have not done one for a while. Often, if they call, I'm usually happy to do that. So it's not a regular feature, but when they ask me to, I love that. Attitude is a great resource.
Yeah, and I know, but you can also search for some of your work on there. So you're everywhere. Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. I think it's been so helpful to people listening and people who will listen in the future. I want to thank everybody who jumped in, dropped things in the comment box. Jessica, Beth, thank you for sharing your feedback and ideas. I think it's helpful for other people to see those things. And I hope we can have you on again in the future, Elizabeth, because I think what you're offering is invaluable for families transitioning to college.
Thank you so much, Sean. I really appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Bye, everybody.